What about in terms of date? Can we figure out from the text what date this is written in? So we have, according to the church father Irenaeus writing, we have Irenaeus saying that this is a testimony written under Domitian, right? So if we quote Irenaeus and go by his judgment, Domitian's reign goes from 81 to 96 CE. So that's the possible range if we go by that particular understanding. And actually, from what we can tell, it's not. It's quite likely that this is the actual date, the one that Irenaeus gives us. So we have, where do we judge from? So if you read through the text carefully and try to match it up with what is happening in history at that moment, that's one possibility, right? So one thing is the use of Babylon to name Rome. So you'll, for a couple of reasons, what's happening in Rome and what's happening under Rome to give it that allegorical name, to compare it to as evil a power within Jewish history, right, and perspective, as Babylon, which created that exile and first destruction of the temple, right? So one clue we have is in 79 CE, we have the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, right? So in chapter 8 of Revelation, we have a great mountain, it said, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea. Is this a reference to that eruption, right? So that's one date that we give that is post CE. Maybe it's referring to this geologic event that was a catastrophe. And another is a possible reference to the siege of Jerusalem by Titus under Vespasian in 70 CE with the destruction of the temple, right? So in chapter 11 of Revelation, it says, they will trample over the holy city, understood as Jerusalem, for 42 months. Does that point to the 3.5 years that Jerusalem is under siege and then taken over? So these are ways that historians might try to figure out and match the coded language of Revelation to what's happening in history at that time for Rome. The other thing is that authorship does not necessarily function in the way we might think of in the modern world. So it's not as if you write a draft, you revise it, you send it to a publisher, it's under you, and then it goes out as one piece. Are there collections of material here that are compiled so that we have, maybe the letter to the seven churches in Asia Minor come from a different date than the visions in these cycles of seven, and then possibly, certain songs and hymns that are included in Revelation might be written and used in liturgy or whatever in different times, right? So it could be a compilation of different pieces put together, compiled at one time, but gathered from different time periods. That's also quite possible. And we see that happening, in quotations. We see that happening in other places in the New Testament where we might have pieces of Mark, right? Obviously being used in Matthew or being used in Luke, right? So in which composition and compilation are not the same. So that complicates it even more. But roughly speaking, given what we find within the text to speak of what's happening in history, and also what Irenaeus says is part of tradition, it's likely that it's written under Domitian, or at least towards the end of the first century. Okay, so then another thing that we might use is the prophecies themselves within Revelation. So one very telling allegory. Remember I said that the beasts and other visions will allegorize what's happening under Roman rule, and a series of rulers are signified by certain symbols and images, right? So in chapter 17, we have this. The seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman is seated. Also, they are seven kings, of whom five have fallen, one is living, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that it was and is not, it is an eighth, but it belongs to the seven and it goes to destruction. This is pretty confusing, right? And I don't blame you if you think this doesn't make it's gibberish, right? You can try to decipher this and match it to different Roman emperors of the time. And why would we do that? Well, for one thing, seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman is seated. Look to the coin on the bottom right-hand side, right? So you see the goddess Roma, which represents Rome, right? As part of civic religion and understanding. There she is. That's the city of Rome represented by a woman. And what is she sitting on? She's sitting on hills or mountains, right? And Rome is a city built on mountains, understood as seven mountains. And so she's seated there. So the coded language of chapter 17 is talking about Rome and also seven kings of Rome, understood as the Roman Empire. So here is one of many possibilities. As you know, we can allegorize and match up and decode in different ways, but here's one way of doing it. So if we follow the text, we have Augustus coming after Julius Caesar's the first king or emperor, right? So these have died. If we understood writing at maybe the time of Domitian, we have five kings that have already died, right? Five have fallen, right? Augustus, Tiberius, Gaius, Claudius, Nero. We're going to skip over Galba, Otho, Vitellius, the year of the three Caesars, right? Then we're going to go with the time within the prophecy, possibly of Vespasian, right? This is the time of this particular prophecy, not when it's written, but the time it's pretending it is, whether it is or not, as Vespasian. And then only a little while that lasts is Titus, right? He only is reigning for 79 to 81. And then finally, at the time of writing, possibly Domitian, right? That he must remain only a little while, Titus, and then the eighth Domitian belongs to the seven that's come before. So what we call this is if John, whoever he is writing under Domitian, he's prophesying what's going to happen, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian. That's called prophecy ex eventu. This is not taking it on faith that prophecy of the future actually exists, but rather this is written at the time of Domitian, looking back and writing prophecy of things that all have already happened so that it matches. So this is one way that scholars have understood from a historical viewpoint what's the decoding of chapter 17, verse 7. One way of understanding these seven heads, the seven kings sitting on the mountains of Rome. So this is another reason why to place the date of Revelation under the reign of Domitian, 81 to 96.